Hi! This is a sniffer from the world of Minecraft. It's heckin' adorable, and I want it. So I'm going to make it, but with a little Wathan Creations twist. My first iteration of the sniffer armature looked a little bit like a creepy centipede, so I scrapped that and went with something a little bit more chunky and cute. After some quick ankle breaking, we can mount the armature on a wood block and find a good pose. The wiggly leg bones were a bit unstable, so to make them stay in place I'll add a small amount of baking soda and a couple drops of super glue to the joints. This creates a wicked strong bond that'll keep our sniffer upright. Sniffers seem sort of like a furry sloth turtle with a shell made of foliage, so I decided to really lean into the tortillian aspects for the legs and feet, starting with some good Michelin Man lumps up and down each shin, and then covering it all up with a plethora of tiny little bumps all over the legs. Then these get blended in with a loop tool and softened with some alcohol. While it's still soft, I'll shape and smooth each lump so that it looks like cartilaginous toenail protrusions poking out from the leg skin. Then I can add a few little sloth-like toe talons, add some texture, and then we'll flip the legification onto the other side, and start in on the body. I'll start by covering the entire sculpture in clay the color of chewed bubblegum, then refine the body to make sure the shapes are right before we start in on the fur. To make my fluffy fella's floof, I'll stick on a plethora of little tufts of clay, loosely blending them in so that they form some furry layers. I figured it would be toughest to get the sniffer's belly, so I took the sculpture off the mounting block to completely cover the tummy. Once that's done, I'll remove my grimy fingerprints with some alcohol, then add a bit of gentle fur texture with a sculpting tool. With the belly finished, I'll flip our spooky sloth sculpture back up on the block, and finish the furring, making sure to steer clear of the little bald spot so that the sniffer's back looks like a medieval friar's head. Without a face, our sniffer looks a bit like a creepy lake monster in a cheesy 80s horror movie. Let's fix that, starting with the sniffer's main feature. The beak starts off as a cube of yellow clay gushed onto the front of the sniffer's face. With a knife and loop tool, I'll carve and shape until I find a halfway blend between a tortillian beak and a blocky Minecraft nose. Then I can poke in some honkin' nose holes, since the sniffer wouldn't be too great at sniffing without them. Then I can etch in a little mouth, and start texturizing the beak. The sniffer uses their beak to dig for seeds after splooting down in the cutest possible way, so I imagine that all that digging in the dirt and rock would cause a whole bunch of scuffs and scrapes. Then with the beaks sorted out, I'll pop in some pre-baked eyeballs into position, then build up the lids, eyebrows, and cheeks. I smoothed out the skin around the eyes using acetone, which is something I learned from Crossing Crafts. If you haven't seen her videos, definitely check them out. Then we can begin the furring of the face, adding little tiny tufts one by one until our fluffy little friend is looking mighty adorable. Like a chicken. But wrong. For the transition between beak and face, I'll add a ring of green fur in the same technique as the rest of the body, only, green. For me, this is when it really started to actually look like a sniffer. I almost forgot the ears, so I'll quickly make some space for them on the head, then add a set that was way too long and floppy, but I'll cut them in half and affix some much more game-accurate listening flaps into place. I really wanted to lean into the turtle aspect, so I wound a loop of clay around the sniffer's back, then added some green clay to the bald spot to make my painting work easier in the future. Then I'll refine the turtle shell shape with a few silicone shapers and sculpting tools. The sniffer's back looks like it's covered in vegetation, but I definitely took some creative liberties away from the original design. My inspiration were those island tortoises, where a turtle has an entire island of trees and bushes and grass growing out of the backs of their shells. So stick around to see how this sniffer island gets brought to life. Then with the sniffer sculpting finished, we're on to the painting. The first step is to paint all the pinkish parts with a vibrant red wash.
Red, the color of blood.
Sorry about that. Then once the sniffer has a bright base coat, I'll come back in and paint individual strands of fur with darker and lighter reds to simulate the pixelated colors of a sniffer's coat in-game. I wasn't sure at first if this idea would work, but especially after a quick wash and some gentle dry brushing, I'm actually really happy with the way it turned out. I'll fix the color of the bald spot, then do the exact same thing to the green fur, starting with a nice base coat of better green, then coming back in to pixelate the strands with some healthy variation. A quick wash and dry brush, And we're on to the beak. I'll paint the yellow a slightly different yellow, then come back in and touch up each scratch and scar with a cork brown. This will give the scrapes a sharper contrast than I could have gotten with washes and dry brushing alone, and it also helps the sniffer to look a little bit more ancient. Then I'll wash the mouth crack to make it stand out more, and finish off the beak with a gentle dry brush to tie it all together. The eyes get painted black, and then given the obligatory UV resin treatment to make them shine. To paint the legs and shell, I'll start with a deep dark brown wash all over the surfaces, and then I'll come back in with a lighter brown dry brushing to emphasize the texture. Then each toenail and toe claw gets painted with a grayish brown to make them look like little stones stuck in the mud. Finally, I'll give all the lumpy bits a sepia wash to add in some aging, and then we can top our sniffer with some glue and make a tiny forest. I didn't realize until it was too late, but my static grass applicator stopped working sometime between now and, well, the last time I used it. So instead of being static grass, it was more just dropped grass. Once the lawnmower clippings are slopped onto the shell, I'll stick a little wire tree in place, and after a few hours the glue is dry and the non-static grass actually wasn't too terrible. Most of it will get covered up anyway, so I'm not that worried. The sniffer seems so at one with nature, digging up seeds so that they can be planted, bringing lost ancient plants back to life. So I thought it would be perfectly fitting to have our sniffer with a shell topped full of nature itself. Lots of twigs and branches and grass, but the main feature of course is the tree growing straight out of its back. I'll make the bonsai-esque leaves using bits of clump foliage, held together and sealed with some watered down PVA glue that'll soak right in and disappear. Then I'll add some bushes to the sniffer's grassy back. And to be biome specific, I made it a flower forest by using lots of colored tufts sprinkled around, along with some larger flowers here and there. Then after some final colorful touches, let's get this sniffer a place to stand. The base starts off as a cube of blue foam, textured gently with a rock and some pliers. Then after a quick priming, I'll turn it into a Minecraft grass block, starting by painting it with several layers of brown, and covering the top with more of my not-so-static grass. I wanted to have the pixelated aesthetic of a dirt block, but still have it be a little bit more realistic, so I sponged on some various different browns and some tan crackle paint, then added a few painted grade stones here and there. Then we can dry brush the surface to tie everything together, and give it all a healthy black wash, dabbing away any excess. I'll goop up the sniffer's dig spot with some homemade Mod Podge mud, then sprinkle in a few different rocks for a bit of added color and realism. Some green flocking and Mod Podge becomes additional goopy grass, draped over the edges of the block with a Q-tip, then spread out all over the surface. For now it looks a little bit gross, but it'll dry back to a nice deep green. I'll use some greenery as my tall grass, then add a few choice blue and pink flowers before we start in on the sniffer's special plants. I'm making a pitcher pod, torchflower, and freshly dug torchflower seed. The pitcher pod's cuboid base gets painted with a simple sepia wash, and then the pitcher itself will be doused with blue and purple washes. For the torchflower seed, I'll drip in some yellow and red into the crevices, and then we'll put each plant together. The pitcher pot is assembled with a stem and some leaves, all glued together before topping it with the blue and purple pitcher. The top is made using translucent clay, making it look almost like colored glass. The torchflower pod is pretty dang simple, but I'll add some roots to the end just to make the cursed garlic bulb a tad more realistic. Finally, the grown torchflower starts off as a stem with some glued on leaves. Then I'll add some yellow dyed wheat sheaths to the top to form the flower petals. These get painted with a red sunset base, and each leaf is tipped with 2 shades of purple. Now we can stick our sniffer in place, add the freshly found seed in the dirt, and stick our 2 formerly lost plants on either side. Now let's see how it turned out. Thank you so much for watching. That's our Minecraft Sniffer looking happy in the flower forest. If you like what you see, consider subscribing, and let me know down in the comments what you think I should make next. A big thank you to my patrons for making this cute video possible. It's nice to take a little bit of a break from the spooky stuff, but I'm pretty sure I'll be back at it again in just a couple weeks. I'll see you then.